Hello, Journal Goddesses. This is your girl, Dion, the Tea Priestess Ruff Sloan, and I am here for another Tea Talk where I sit down and talk to some of my favorite creative people around the interwebs and help you get to know them better and just really have a conversation with all of the people that I love the most. And today we are talking with Andrea Schroeder, and I have been a big fan of Andrea's for years and years and years, from when before she was the Creative Dream Incubator. It was ABC Creativity. I mean,
Oh, you
I
remember
followed,
that?
yes, I have followed you through multiple iterations of what you are doing and showing up and what the work is that you're putting out in the world. And the thing that I love about Andrea is that she's very visible with the way that she transforms things and takes kind of the discomfort out of being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. But I want you to get to know her better because her work has been really part of the foundation that has helped me to start to show up more and more and more in the world. So thank you, Andrea, for taking time to speak with me, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I love the way that you show up on video, and it was just like, yay, I'm happy to be able to connect with you again. I think this is just going to be fun. So thank
Yes, thank you, thank you. So you have been an online creative for almost 10 years now, right? It's been about 9, 10 years.
It's been, yeah, like 8 years full time, and I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 before that when I started, because I actually deleted a lot of my earlier blog posts, so I can't
Mm.
tell exactly when that was. But yeah, about that.
And I think that's a phenomenal just kind of statement as to how you actually can have this thriving, creative, spiritual, supportive career, artistic career online, and really have it change your life. And when I first ran into you, I think you were still only doing things part time, because my first experience of your work was in when Mindy did the camp. I can't remember what the
Oh yeah,
yeah. And you had
yeah.
this, and you had this really beautiful creative practice around creating collages on the chakras and then having a conversation on the chakras. And so all of your work that I've experienced with you has been really bridging this creative aspect, and then allowing your dreams or your goals to be expressed through this creative aspect. How did you come to really start working in that way for yourself?
Oh wow. Start with a big question.
I know, right? Let's just jump right into we
Jump
don't
right
want
in.
light stuff here.
No. Um, I started like I mean, it's interesting for me. For me, like creativity and spirituality are just linked.
Mm,
And I don't know even where that came from. Like I felt it, since I was a child for sure. And then definitely as a teenager, it was a little stronger. But I also had no like creative outlets or
mm,
confidence or
mm,
any of those, like trust in myself. So I went to university for fashion design, and what happened there was my creative spirit was crushed.
mm,
Like all this stuff, like having to create on demand and having to think about the market and having to, it felt like force your creativity into a very specific, like capitalist kind of form. I didn't understand what was happening at the time, but in hindsight, I see like it was crushing my creative spirit and it was showing me what not to do.
mm,
And then a part of, because everything was so hard at that time, also just like the big struggle with school and thinking I would do better and I wasn't. My favorite aunt passed away at the same time, who was very into spirituality, and I ended up inheriting a lot of her books and started reading more about it. And I started, working on my own self and exploring spirituality for myself, which really shifted my creativity without me noticing. My
mm.
last year of university, I stopped listening to my teachers so much and started to learn to trust my creative instinct. And I ended up doing really well. The final project was worth all of our points for everything. And I did really well. I was like right at the top after almost failing for the past couple of years. So it really
Mm.
showed me, oh yeah, it's different when you trust your creative instinct. So that was a really good lesson, even though I dabbled a little bit in fashion design. I never really stayed on that path, but it really gave me that tangible sense of what it means to follow my creative instinct. And then later on, I was studying to be like a spiritual counselor and do healing circles and things. And it was so boring. The material was so dry. It was like I was so into it. And I was like, oh, couldn't they, have us do this in a more interesting way? And so in my own, like on the homework, I started bringing the collaging in and painting and displaying. And that brought everything to life for me. And that's where, as soon as I started leading groups, I started also creating my own creativity workshops to bring that all together. I think for creative people, we need to combine them.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that's definitely what attracted me to your work, because you have this beautiful, deep connection to talking about spiritual concepts through a creative lens. And it just, for me, it just really made sense, instead of kind of, I think we have a tendency to kind of segregate ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're only this way with this certain people. We're only this way with this certain people. And so it was really very helpful to have that integration as I was starting to explore what it meant for me to be a priestess, what it meant for me to be creative online. And so with you, what I loved about you is that you applied these things to yourself all the time, and then you come through and you talk about what you discovered when you applied them to yourself. And do you find that really helps people get a more grounded sense of how they can do this as well?
It does. It also kind of makes me think of the other piece of the puzzle is our emotional selves, and actually making space for how we're really feeling. And too often that is left out of both the creativity and the spirituality. And so by being present with what's actually happening for us, we're more grounded and powerful, both as creative beings and as spiritual beings. And it's terrifying, right? So yeah, I'm always doing the work myself and sharing that as a way to help create space, to help invite people, because I can say it's okay to feel afraid, but you're not going to believe that if you're, on the other side of a computer screen doing it.
Right.
So it does feel like an important part of how I teach is by living what I'm teaching myself, and sharing that every day, so that some days things are rough and it looks like I'm not going to make it through, and some days everything's amazing. And you need to see the whole picture, because we do, especially as teachers and creatives, sometimes we only share the highlight reels online, or what we're most proud of, which we should share. I just try to be really aware of sharing the full picture with my students, so they understand when you're feeling anxious and terrified, that doesn't mean something's wrong or you can't get to where you want to be. So yeah, it's important.
And I think there's a level of vulnerability, and I think you handle that so beautifully. So how did you go about starting to share those kind of vulnerable, messy bits online?
Well, how did I start? I know the reason why I'm able to do it is because I trust myself to work through it. And the reason why I trust myself to work through it is because I have a lot of practice. And I also spent several years doing intense workshops around that, and working on just being able to be more comfortable with my feelings. And then just thinking back to when I really started, I think what happened is probably I was explaining how to do things and people were getting all tangled up in it, and I would have noticed I need to be providing a better example. That feels like that's it, but right in this moment, I can't quite remember what made me start.
And I think that's beautiful, though, just to even be able to have that example, because I feel like you hold that so beautifully. I feel like it gives an intimate picture, but it doesn't give all of yourself away online. This seems to be like this big push. You're either in this polarized position where you're doing you're showing all of your business online, or you're sharing none of the business online. And so I think you've kind of gotten to this beautiful balance where you're showing how you're doing the work, but you have some things that are still personal and vulnerable. And you've created this beautiful boundary around that. I watched a video of the other day of yours, and if you are not subscribed to the Creative Dream Incubator on YouTube, you're missing out on a lot of little gems. But the one that I want to highlight is the video that you talked about. I say no to most opportunities to grow my business, and I found it hilarious because I had like just recently asked you, and you were like, yes. And so I had watched this video, and then it was like, oh, I am special. Okay. I have worked with her before. I have developed this relationship with her, so she knows what I'm about. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But where did that really come from? Because I know for myself, there are a lot of people who are saying, okay, if you want to have an online business, you have to do it like X, Y, Z, P, D, Q, So you are really kind of striking out and saying, hey, no, it doesn't have to be like anything, right? So could you talk a little bit more about where that came from?
I mean, I'm seeing some people that I have seen as role models for my whole life almost, doing things now online that feel sleazy to me. And, so I've been talking about it with some of my, friends who have similar businesses, and where we feel the same way. It's like, well, we still totally respect these people, and we understand they need to make money. And in some cases, it seems like maybe something happened where they need a lot of money, but it feels like that desperation is what pushing this, because there's a lot of sleaze online, and just that wish to not. It's not even just a wish to not do business that way. I don't think it's a good way to do business for people in our field. Like, we don't want someone, you don't want to work with someone who is manipulated into hiring you, who now isn't really ready to do the work. Like, that just doesn't make sense. But I guess, there has been a lot of talk the past couple of years. Really, I think it started when Trump was elected in the US, starting to notice people starting to take a look at like what's going on in the world and how can I help things be better. And in some ways, a lot of it is like, primarily white women not noticing a lot of terrible things because we have that privilege and not having to notice. So all of these awful learning experiences and, waking up to what's really happening in the world, and then kind of having that expand into looking at, well, how do we live with more integrity? How do we live with greater sense of justice? So it's just like, it's such a bigger question for me than just the online business stuff. But so in exploring all of these topics and looking at, well, who gets more attention online and why? And that's been a question I've always wondered since I started. Why do some people become so popular and others do not? And it isn't about how gifted they are. A lot of it is about marketing, and that adds to some of the unfairness. Like sometimes, and it's not just unfair, sometimes it pisses me off. People become very popular and they're not even that good at what they're doing because they focus their energy on learning how to get popular, learning how to do marketing better. Whereas some of us are focusing more our energy on learning to do the work better. So it's just all of these conversations that I have in private, decided to put them out there a little more, especially as I see it become these like established norms. This is how you have to do an online business. So like if you're doing those summits, everyone has to have a certain number of people on their email list. So you're already leaving out anyone with fewer subscribers, which is what if they're really good and would contribute to the summit, right?
Right.
And then they're also asking that you send emails just about the summit that this person writes for you. And like, that's not the relationship I want to have with my email subscribers, right? Like, there's a certain level of trust that I think gets betrayed in a lot of the ways that the gurus are telling us to do business. So
Mm-hmm.
we're so creative. And thinking back, like in 2010, I know when I was blogging, I felt like there was so much more freedom, and creative people were looking at how do we find ways to do things. And now it's like we're being told the ways to do things. So I'd like to go back. Yeah.
And then talking about the way that the election in the U.S. has really affected everyone. One of the like folks, I told you I love Andrea, and Andrea is one of the people who, having a small business, she actively talks about the racism, the injustice, all of these things. And I feel like there's a little bit of fear around some people to, oh, I'm just starting out in my small business. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to alienate potential clients. And what was important for you about that? Because you're not a U.S. citizen, you're in Canada, but you started really looking at the ways that the Canadian systems were unfair and unjust, and started speaking about that really actively.
I also, around that time, got married to a Native Canadian. And even when we were dating, I wasn't noticing everything quite as much, but especially now that this is my family, I'm seeing more clearly the segregation and problems that we have here that we don't talk about, and that we have this great reputation in the world, and yet what we're doing is terrible. I also started reading books by Native Canadians explaining the history of this country, and just like educating myself to learn more. I don't want to have customers who are uncomfortable talking. No. Everyone can be uncomfortable talking about race, but if you actually want someone to shut up and if you don't want to hear it, I'm not sure I really want to work with you. If you're not like, it's like, yeah, I think you have to make that choice. So it didn't feel scary to me. I didn't worry about losing business. I didn't think I had a lot of business from people who, I know that I had, and I maybe still do have some customers who would support the Republicans for certain reasons, especially because of abortion for religious reasons, which is something I can understand, even though I don't believe that way. But where you're at now, it's really hard to want to cater to someone who is willing to support that kind of destruction.
And I think it speaks to a level of the energy and integrity of your own business merging with the integrity of your personal values.
Right.
Yeah. So when you work with somebody, one of my favorite practices is you have them envision themselves and bring whatever they're wanting to create in their lives, and have them have a conversation with them with it, because it's like the spirit of you talking to the spirit of of their creations, and seeing how it can be moved forward. Where did that come from? Because that has been so powerful for me.
It's amazing, eh? The first place I heard, it wasn't an idea for talking to it, but it was that like I am trained as a new thought practitioner, and so a lot, and I'm not super into that anymore, especially as I take a closer look at the world. It's like this was a practice made by these white men who were so privileged and probably had women taking care of things for them, and it just feels so ungrounded. Like, how is this practical in the real world? But one idea that I did that they liked, they called it a spiritual prototype. So if there is an intention that you want, and I do believe that your dreams come from that sacred place in you where they're calling you towards your true self. So sometimes you might start out a little superficial, like I just want more money or I want to cruise. But as you really start to trust your dreams and get into it, they start to become more manifestations of your authentic self. And so what these people said is that there is a spiritual prototype that already exists, and that this is a real thing in the spiritual realm, and you can draw on that energy. And so as I really contemplated that, I could notice how there's this alive relationship there. And then later on, I took classes with Hiro Boga. I don't know if you know her. She's a really beautiful person. She's a coach for entrepreneurs and just a lot of energy work. And she brought that in richer as well, like really working on those relationships with the invisible realms. And then it just kind of gradually, I think actually, although by then maybe I was already talking to them, but I just sort of learned to trust it more, that I could tell people, you can talk to your dream. Remember I had one client who was really kind of not into this creative stuff at all, but she needed help with a project. And I was asking her to talk to her project. And she was just like, really? And she was just so, thought this was so weird. It's like, can you just try? Like, just, you know, I'm asking you to try. And then when she got into it, she was like, whoa, my project has so much to tell me. And it's just like, the more I explore, like we can talk to everything, like everything is alive in some way. And that there's, I mean, just kind of going beyond our normal thinking always expands our possibilities.
And I think some of the resistance might even come from the fact that, you know, we have, again, we're polarized in this either or dynamic. Either your art, either whatever you're creating is good enough to be called art and hung in a museum, or it's not worth a value. And so do you find that a lot of people who are, or any people who are attracted to your work are trying to shift themselves from that polarization? Or are you finding, or initially did you find that people had a lot of resistance to using their creativity in this way?
Actually, I think those people are scared off when they see my website. I know, like, once in a while I will have someone, you know, subscribe to my emails and then write to me and be like, no, I need to know that this will succeed. That everyone will want to buy it, or else it's someone that said recently, or else it's not worth my time. And right now I feel like if that's where you're at, I don't want to argue. I don't believe that that's true for anyone, but everyone gets to make their own choices about what's true for them. It's not a way of seeing things that leads to a lot of joy. And I think that's actually just like one of our fear or procrastination mechanisms trying to keep us safe, right? So I won't try and then I won't fail. So much pain in failing when your dreams are so close to your heart. Which is, again, why I talk so much about the uncomfortable feelings, because you're going to have them at some point.
Right. And I love that you create this really safe container to do so. It's safe and it's playful, even though, you know, the stuff that you're dealing with might be hard, might be challenging, but at least you have the capacity and the tools to bring some levity to something that can be very challenging for your current worldview. So yeah, beautiful. So I have one more question for you, Andrea, and I'm hoping that this is equally as big as the first question that we started with. But as we are moving forward towards 2020, there's I know in my realm, I do a lot of work with the elements and with the above teachings and envisioning what we want to see come into the world. What in the 21st century would you like to see creatives be able to proclaim and do for themselves and manifest in the world?
Oh, I would like us to claim our true dreams. That actually brings me back to the online business gurus, right? Who are trying to tell us that we want to have these huge businesses. And I don't think most of us even want that. Like, we want to be financially stable. We want to be able to pay for the lives that we want to live. But most of us don't need, like, you know, gilded whatever. Right. We want to live well. And so to claim those true dreams in a grounded way, and then to feel free to move towards them, and also like that we take all of the magic and inspiration and happiness and joy that you feel about making your art. What if we take all that and put it into how you create your business? so that you're really creating a life that like fits you perfectly. You're not like doing it just, yeah. It's I mean, there's all these stories about how hard it is for creatives to make a living in the world, and we're now at a place where it doesn't have to be. Right? So that's what really annoyed me about the gurus kind of coming in and telling us to do things this way, and not just that the gurus came in, but that it seems like it's happening. The industry is becoming more the same. People are doing things the same, and we're creative spirits, and so we can all find our own unique ways of doing things. So having the freedom to do that, like trusting yourself, yeah, just connecting more deeply with the people who resonate with your work, and yeah, that freedom, creative freedom.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Oh my goodness, Journal Goddesses, what did I tell you about this woman? Phenomenal, right? So if you enjoyed this conversation, do make sure that you give me a thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe, because I'm going to be talking to a whole lot more creatives. And if you want to connect to Andrea, I will make sure that I have all of her information in the description box. But really, you just want to type in the YouTube search right now, Creative Dream Incubator, and go into her channel, because I love, love, love her videos. Like as much as she says that that I inspired her, she really inspired me to really get myself onto video more often. So, Andrea, thank you so much for all of your work. I know I have benefited tremendously from it, and I love you. I love everything that you're doing in the world. I love how you're showing up in the world, and I'm just deeply grateful for you. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you.
Alrighty, until next time, Journal Goddesses, do take good care of yourself and go create something.